Hey star-crossed souls. Ready to risk everything for a love no law can allow? Tonight, we're diving into a world where ancient bloodlines collide, where the scent of your enemy's daughter can drive you to madness, and where one stolen kiss could ignite a war that's been brewing for centuries. In the shadows of the Colorado Rockies, two hearts beat as one, but their packs have been sworn enemies since the first moon rose over these mountains. Some loves are meant to be hidden in the shadows, but can they survive the light? Chapter 1. The night air carried death on its breath. Kira Blackthorne pressed her back against the rough bark of an ancient pine, her heart hammering against her ribs as the acrid smell of smoke and spilled blood drifted through the forest. The monthly border patrol should have been routine, a simple sweep of the neutral territory that separated the Blackthorne pack from their sworn enemies, the Silvermoons. But tonight, something had gone terribly wrong. Alpha's daughter or not, you shouldn't be out here alone. Marcus, her father's beta, materialized from the shadows with the fluid grace that marked all of their kind. His amber eyes glowed with concern and barely contained wolf light. The Silvermoons are moving closer to our borders than they have in decades. Kira's fingers flexed, her nails lengthening into claws before she forced them back to human form. At 24, she was one of the strongest fighters in the Blackthorne pack, but Marcus still treated her like the reckless teenager who used to sneak out to hunt rabbits in forbidden territory. "I can handle myself," she said, though her voice carried the tremor she couldn't quite suppress. "Besides, someone needs to find out what they're planning. The scent markers are all wrong tonight. Too fresh, too many wolves crossing into neutral ground." Marcus stepped closer, his nostrils flaring as he tested the air. His expression darkened. "You're right. This isn't a patrol. This is." A branch snapped in the darkness beyond the tree-line. Both wolves froze, every instinct screaming danger as a new scent hit them like a physical blow. Male. Strong. Silvermoon. But underneath the familiar markers of the enemy pack, something else lurked. Something that made Kira's wolf whimper and press against her consciousness with sudden, inexplicable longing. "Run," Marcus whispered, his hand moving to the silver blade at his hip. "Get back to pack lands. Now." But it was too late. He stepped into the moonlight like he was walking out of her dreams and into her nightmares. Tall and lean, with the kind of dangerous beauty that belonged in fairy tales about devils and angels, the Silvermoon wolf should have triggered every defensive instinct she possessed. Instead, Kira found herself drinking in the sight of him. The way his dark hair caught the silver light, the impossible blue of his eyes, the predatory grace in every movement. Well. His voice was silk over steel, with just a hint of an accent that spoke of the old country, where their kinds had first learned to hate each other. "What do we have here? A little Blackthorne pup, so far from home." The insult should have sent her into a rage. Instead, all Kira could focus on was the way his scent wrapped around her like smoke and pine needles, and something indefinably male that made her wolf pace restlessly beneath her skin. Marcus snarled, stepping protectively in front of her. "Damon Silvermoon. I should have known. What brings the enemy prince slumming in neutral territory?" Damon, so that was his name. It rolled through Kira's mind like honey, and she had to bite her lip to keep from whimpering aloud. What the hell was wrong with her? "Same thing that brings you, I imagine," Damon replied, his gaze sliding past Marcus to fix on Kira with laser intensity. "Curiosity about what the other side is planning. Though I admit, the view is much more interesting than I expected." Heat bloomed in Kira's cheeks, and she stepped out from behind Marcus before she could think better of it. "I'm not afraid of you." Damon's smile was slow and devastating. "No, you should be, little wolf. But not for the reasons you think." "Don't listen to him, Kira," Marcus growled, his wolf beginning to push through his human facade. "Silvermoons are liars and manipulators. It's in their blood. As opposed to Blackthorns, who are known for their even tempers and forgiving nature." Damon's eyes never left Kira's face. "Tell me, princess, do you always let others speak for you? Or do you have a voice of your own?" The challenge in his tone made her spine straighten. "I speak for myself, thanks. And what I'm saying is that you're trespassing on neutral ground with what smells like a full hunting party. That breaks the accords." "Does it?" He took a step closer, and Kira's breath caught as his scent grew stronger. God, why did he have to smell so good? Like winter storms and wild places, and everything her wolf had ever hungered for. The same accords that forbid Blackthorne warriors from patrolling beyond your borders? "Pot, meet kettle, princess." "We're investigating suspicious activity," Marcus snapped. "Your pack has been." A howl echoed through the forest, long and mournful and undeniably Silvermoon. More wolves were coming. Damon's head cocked, listening to harmonics that human ears couldn't catch. When he looked back at Kira, something had shifted in his expression, urgency mixing with what might have been genuine concern. "You need to leave. Now." "Is that a threat?" Kira demanded, even as her own wolf began to pace with nervous energy. "It's a warning." His voice dropped to barely above a whisper. "My father's hunting party isn't as open-minded as I am when it comes to finding enemy wolves on neutral ground. Especially not the daughter of his greatest enemy." Another howl, closer this time, answered by two more from different directions. They were being surrounded. Marcus grabbed Kira's arm. "We're leaving. Now." But as he tried to pull her back toward Blackthorn territory, Kira found herself frozen, caught in the intensity of Damon's gaze. For a heartbeat that stretched into eternity, the rest of the world fell away. The approaching wolves, Marcus's urgent tugging, even the scent of violence that still stained the wind. There was only Damon, looking at her like she was the answer to a question he'd been asking his whole life. "Until we meet again, Princess Kira," he murmured, and her name on his lips sent shivers racing down her spine. Then Marcus succeeded in pulling her into the shadows, and they were running, crashing through the underbrush as the night filled with the sounds of pursuit. But even as branches tore at her clothes and her lungs burned with the effort of escape, Kira couldn't stop thinking about electric blue eyes and a voice that promised dangerous things. She'd encountered the enemy prince of the Silvermoon pack. And God help her, she wanted to see him again. Behind them, a howl rose into the night. Different from the others, more complex, layered with meanings her wolf understood even if her human mind couldn't translate them. It sounded like a promise. Or a threat. Maybe both. As they reached the safety of Blackthorn borders, one thought echoed through Kira's mind, terrifying in its clarity. Everything had just changed, and there would be no going back. The scent of war was in the air, but underneath it lurked something far more dangerous. The scent of a mate she could never have. Chapter 2. 3 nights had passed since the encounter in neutral territory, and Kira felt like she was slowly losing her mind. Every breath carried the phantom scent of winter storms and wild places. Every shadow held the promise of electric blue eyes. Her wolf paced restlessly beneath her skin, whimpering for something she couldn't have, shouldn't want, and definitely couldn't tell anyone about. "You're distracted." Her father's voice cut through her wandering thoughts like a blade. Alpha Thane Blackthorn stood at the head of the pack's council table, his steel-gray eyes missing nothing as they fixed on his daughter. "Marcus tells me you encountered Silvermoons on patrol." The great hall of the Blackthorn compound fell silent. 20 pairs of eyes turned toward Kira, and she fought to keep her expression neutral even as her heart hammered against her ribs. The massive log structure, with its soaring ceilings and ancient pack banners, suddenly felt as confining as a cage. "Just one," she said carefully. "Damon Silvermoon was scouting neutral territory. We exchanged words and parted ways." Her father's lieutenant, a scarred veteran named Cole, leaned forward. "Exchanged words? With the enemy prince? You should have killed him where he stood." "On neutral ground." Kira raised an eyebrow. "That would have violated every treaty we've signed in the last century. Besides, he wasn't alone. His father's hunting party was close enough to hear a howl." "Smart girl." Her father's approval warmed her, even as guilt twisted in her stomach. If he knew what she was really thinking about the Silvermoon prince. But Cole raises a valid point. Damon Silvermoon is dangerous in ways that go beyond his fighting skills. His bloodline carries old magic, older than our feud. You do well to remember that. Old magic. The word sent a chill down Kira's spine. Every pack child grew up hearing whispers about the ancient powers that ran in certain bloodlines. Gifts that had been diluted over generations, but never completely lost. The ability to call pack bonds across impossible distances. Healing that defied natural law. And rarest of all, the power to forge mate bonds that transcended pack loyalty. What kind of old magic? The question slipped out before she could stop it. Several council members exchanged glances, and her father's expression grew troubled. The kind that makes enemies of natural allies and allies of natural enemies. His great-grandmother was Elena Silvermoon. She nearly ended our feud 3 generations ago by seducing the Blackthorn heir. Nearly destroyed both packs in the process. The blood drained from Kira's face. What happened to them? What always happens when wolves forget their loyalties? Cole's voice was brutal. They were executed. Both of them. And their unborn child with them. The words hit Kira like a physical blow. She gripped the edge of the table, fighting to keep from swaying as images flashed through her mind. Damon's eyes in the moonlight, the way her wolf had recognized him on some primal level, the rightness of his scent wrapped around her. That's enough history for one night, her father said, but his gaze remained fixed on Kira's face. The point is, we can't afford to underestimate the Silvermoons. Their magic makes them unpredictable. Dangerous. As the council meeting disbanded, Kira escaped to her room in the Alpha's lodge, her mind reeling. Old magic. Seduction. Mate bonds that transcended pack loyalty. Was that what she'd felt in the forest? Some kind of supernatural compulsion designed to weaken her pack's defenses? But as she stood at her window, staring out at the moon-silvered mountains, her wolf pressed against her consciousness with desperate longing. This didn't feel like manipulation. It felt like coming home. A soft tap at her window made her heart stop. A figure crouched on the narrow ledge outside her second-story room, and moonlight gleamed off familiar dark hair and impossible blue eyes. "Hello, princess." Kira's hands shook as she opened the window. "Are you insane? This is the heart of Blackthorne territory. If anyone sees you, then we'd better make sure no one sees me." Damon slipped through the window with liquid grace, and suddenly her spacious bedroom felt impossibly small. Nice accommodations. Very rustic. "What are you doing here?" But even as she demanded answers, Kira was drinking in the sight of him. The way his black sweater clung to broad shoulders, the elegant line of his throat, the dangerous beauty that belonged in fairy tales about creatures who stole hearts and souls. "I couldn't stop thinking about you." The simple honesty in his voice made her knees weak. 3 days and nights, and all I can smell is wild roses and summer rain. All I can see are amber eyes that look at me like I'm not the monster my bloodline made me. "You are the monster," Kira whispered, but there was no conviction in her voice. "Your pack killed my uncle. Your father would tear my throat out for sport. And your pack burned our sacred grove." Damon took a step closer, and she could feel the heat radiating from his skin. "Your grandfather put a silver blade through my great-uncle's heart. We could trade atrocities all night, princess. The question is, do you want to?" She stared at him, caught between desire and duty, longing and logic. "This is madness." "Yes," he agreed softly. "Complete and utter madness. So why does it feel like the sanest thing I've ever done?" Before she could answer, before she could think of all the reasons this was impossible, he was touching her face with reverent fingers. His scent wrapped around her like a drug, and her wolf practically purred with satisfaction. "One night," Damon murmured against her skin. "Give me one night to show you that we're more than our bloodlines. More than this ancient hatred that's poisoned our kinds for centuries." One night, Kira breathed, and sealed both their fates. What followed was the most dangerous night of her life, and the most perfect. They talked in whispers about everything except the war between their packs. He told her about the mountains where he'd grown up, about running wild under stars that seemed close enough to touch. She showed him her collection of books, stories from the human world that painted pictures of love conquering impossible odds. When dawn approached and he had to leave, Damon paused at the window. "Meet me tomorrow night. The old stone circle in neutral territory. You know the one I mean." Kira nodded, unable to speak around the lump in her throat. "This isn't over, princess. I don't care what our families have done to each other. What I feel for you, it's bigger than their hatred." After he was gone, Kira curled up in her bed, surrounded by the lingering scent of winter storms and wild places. Her rational mind screamed warnings, but her heart sang with possibilities she'd never dared imagine. She was going to meet him again. God help them both. Chapter 3. The ancient stone circle sat in a clearing deep in neutral territory, its weathered monoliths reaching toward the star-drunk sky like the fingers of sleeping giants. Local legend claimed it was older than the first werewolf, older than the feuds that split their kinds. A place where magic ran so deep that even enemies could find peace. Kira hoped the legends were true. She arrived first, her wolf eyes picking out every detail of the sacred space. 12 stones arranged in a perfect circle, each one carved with symbols that predated written language. The grass within the circle grew greener than anywhere else in the forest, and wildflowers bloomed here even in the depths of winter. "I wasn't sure you'd come." Damon's voice emerged from the shadows between two ancient stones, and Kira's heart leaped even as she tried to project calm. He looked different away from the moonlight of her bedroom. More dangerous, more wild, more beautiful in a way that made her chest ache. I almost didn't. She stepped into the circle, feeling the subtle shift in energy as she crossed the threshold. Magic hummed in the air around them, older and deeper than pack bonds or blood feuds. My father spent dinner talking about increasing security. Your little visit didn't go as unnoticed as we thought. Damon's expression darkened. Did he suspect you? No, but he's not stupid. Someone reported a strange scent near the Alpha's lodge. Kira moved closer, drawn by forces she didn't entirely understand. We can't keep meeting like this. It's too dangerous. Then how? His hands came up to frame her face, and she leaned into the touch despite every instinct screaming warnings. Because I can't give this up, Kira. I can't give you up. Not when I've just found you. The raw honesty in his voice made her throat tight. Found me? Damon, we barely know each other. This could just be. What? Lust. Curiosity about the forbidden. He stepped closer, until she could feel his breath against her lips. Tell me you don't feel it, princess. Tell me your wolf doesn't recognize mine. She couldn't, because the truth was written in every accelerated heartbeat, every breath that carried more of his scent deep into her lungs. Her wolf didn't just recognize him. It had claimed him on some primal level that transcended logic or loyalty. The mate bond, she whispered. That's what this is, isn't it? What your great-grandmother felt for the Blackthorn heir. Damon's hands stilled against her cheeks. You know about Elena and James? My father told me the story tonight. As a warning, Kira's laugh was bitter. They were executed for what we're doing right now. Torn apart by their own packs for the crime of loving across enemy lines. And yet here we are. His thumb traced the line of her cheekbone with devastating gentleness. Knowing the cost, understanding the danger, and still unable to walk away. Because we're fools. Because we're fated. He pressed his forehead against hers, and the simple contact sent electricity racing through her veins. Do you know what Elena wrote in her final letter? The one they found in her cell after the execution. Kira shook her head, afraid to speak. Love is the only magic strong enough to break old curses, Damon quoted softly. But only if we're brave enough to let it. Tears pricked at Kira's eyes. She was wrong. Their love didn't break anything. It just gave both packs another reason to hate. Maybe they weren't brave enough. Maybe the time wasn't right. His hands slid down to capture hers, lacing their fingers together. But maybe we can finish what they started. Before she could respond, before she could point out all the ways that was impossible, his mouth was on hers. The kiss started soft, almost hesitant, but quickly deepened into something desperate and hungry. Kira melted against him, her wolf singing with joy as his scent surrounded her completely. This was what poets wrote about, what songs tried to capture and failed. This feeling of completion, of finding the other half of her soul in the most impossible place. When they finally broke apart, both were breathing hard. This is insane, Kira gasped. Completely. Damon's smile was crooked and devastating. But I've never felt more sane in my life. They spent the rest of the night talking, touching, learning the shape of each other's dreams. Damon told her about the pressure of being the Silvermoon heir. About a father who saw enemies in every shadow and expected his son to carry forward generations of hatred. Kira shared her own struggles with expectation. The weight of being an alpha's daughter in a world where strength was measured in the ability to destroy rather than protect. What if we could change things? Damon asked as dawn began to lighten the eastern sky. What if we could end this feud instead of perpetuating it? How? Our packs have been enemies for over 2 centuries. People have died, Damon. On both sides. That kind of hatred doesn't just disappear because 2 people fall in love. Elena and James thought it could. Maybe they were just ahead of their time. Kira wanted to believe him. God, how she wanted to believe that love could triumph over generations of bloodshed and mistrust. But the rational part of her mind, the part trained from birth to think like an alpha's heir, whispered harsh truths. Even if we could convince our families, the packs would never accept it. Too much blood has been spilled. Too many old wounds still fester. Then we make new wounds heal first. Damon's voice carried absolute conviction. We show them that Blackthorns and Silvermoons can work together. That we're stronger united than divided. And how exactly do we do that without getting ourselves killed in the process? His smile was sharp and dangerous and full of possibilities. Leave that to me, princess. But first, we need allies. people on both sides who might be willing to consider that there's a better way than endless war. As they prepared to part ways, Damon caught her hand one last time. Tomorrow night. The old hunting cabin by Mirror Lake. Do you know it? Kira nodded. The cabin had been abandoned for decades, left to weather and wolves after its owner died in one of the pack skirmishes. We'll have more privacy there. More time. His eyes darkened with promise. And we're going to need both if we're going to figure out how to save our packs from themselves. After he melted back into the forest, Kira stood alone in the stone circle, her heart torn between hope and terror. They were planning treason against everything their bloodlines stood for, and she couldn't wait to see him again. But as she made her way back toward Blackthorn territory, a familiar scent on the wind made her blood run cold. Marcus had been tracking her. The beta stepped out from behind a massive oak, his amber eyes glowing with hurt and suspicion. Care to explain why you smell like our enemies, Kira? Her world tilted on its axis. Discovery. Disgrace. The end of everything before it had truly begun. Marcus, I can explain. You'd better. Because right now, the only thing keeping me from dragging you back to your father in chains is the hope that there's an innocent explanation for why the Alpha's daughter reeks of Silvermoon. Kira's mind raced. One wrong word, one slip, and not only would her secret be exposed, Damon would be walking into a trap the next night. I was tracking them, she said finally, trying to figure out what they were planning. Sometimes you have to get close to learn the truth. Marcus studied her face with the intensity of a wolf scenting for lies. Finally, slowly, he nodded. Just remember, Kira, some truths are too dangerous to pursue, and some enemies are too cunning to hunt alone. As he disappeared into the forest, Kira realized that time was running out. Their secret meetings had bought them 3 precious nights, but the walls were closing in. Tomorrow, she would have to choose between love and loyalty, and she still had no idea which would win. Chapter 4. The abandoned hunting cabin squatted beside Mirror Lake like a wounded animal, its weathered logs silver in the moonlight. Kira approached cautiously, every sense alert for signs of danger. After her encounter with Marcus, she'd spent the entire day jumping at shadows and second-guessing every decision. But when Damon emerged from the cabin doorway, backlit by the warm glow of a fire he'd somehow managed to light in the old stone hearth, all her doubts evaporated like morning mist. You came, he said, and the relief in his voice told her he'd been as uncertain as she was. I said I would. She stepped into the circle of firelight, acutely aware of how intimate the setting was. The cabin's single room held only the basics: a stone fireplace, a rough wooden table, and a bed frame that had seen better decades. Though I have to warn you, Marcus is suspicious. We need to be more careful. Damon's expression darkened. How suspicious? He followed me last night. Caught my scent when I got home. Kira moved to the window, peering out at the lake's mirror-smooth surface. I convinced him I was tracking Silvermoons for intelligence, but he's not stupid. If he catches us together, he won't. Damon came up behind her, his reflection joining hers in the glass. I have something that might help with that problem, and several others. She turned to face him. What do you mean? Instead of answering immediately, Damon moved to the old table where he'd laid out what looked like official documents. Maps, correspondence, and something that made Kira's blood run cold. Surveillance photos of both pack territories. Where did you get these? She whispered, recognizing the aerial shots of her own family's compound. My father's private files. He's been planning something, Kira. Something that goes far beyond the usual border skirmishes and posturing. Damon's jaw was tight with anger. He's been working with humans. Military contractors, from what I can tell. Planning to use government connections to have Blackthorn territory declared an environmental hazard. Kira's knees went weak. That's impossible. Our lands have been protected by federal treaty for over a century. Treaties can be overturned if you have the right connections and the right evidence of ecological damage. Damon tapped one of the photos. See these markings? Chemical analysis points. Someone's been planting evidence of contamination on your borders. But why? Even as she asked the question, Kira knew the answer would be terrible. Because environmental cleanup gives humans the legal right to relocate entire populations. Your pack would be scattered to the winds, forced to integrate with other territories. Damon's voice was grim. And once you're divided, weakened, cut off from your power base, you finish us off. The truth hit like a physical blow. This isn't about honor or ancient grudges anymore. Your father means to commit genocide. My father is a sick man who's let hatred poison his judgment. Damon's hands clenched into fists. But not all Silvermoons support his methods. That's why I took these files. That's why I'm here. Kira stared at the documents spread across the table, her mind reeling. You're committing treason against your own pack. I'm trying to prevent a massacre. He moved closer, his scent wrapping around her like comfort in the midst of chaos. Kira, if we don't do something, this war is going to escalate beyond anything our kinds have ever seen. Human involvement changes everything. Once they're in our business, there's no going back to the old ways. What are you proposing? Alliance. Real alliance, not just a ceasefire. His eyes blazed with conviction. Our packs working together to expose my father's human connections, to present a united front against outside interference. Even if I agreed, even if I thought it was possible, which I don't, how do we convince 2 centuries of enemies to trust each other? Damon's smile was soft and sad. The same way Elena and James tried to, with a bond that can't be broken or denied. The words hung between them, heavy with implication. Kira felt her world shift on its axis as she understood what he was suggesting. A mating ceremony. Her voice came out barely above a whisper. You want us to complete the bond. Publicly. It's the only way. Pack law is absolute when it comes to true mates. Even my father couldn't argue against the will of the moon goddess. Damon reached for her hands, and she let him take them despite the trembling that started in her fingers and spread through her entire body. I know what I'm asking. I know the risk. Risk? Kira's laugh was sharp and brittle. Damon, they'll kill us. Both sides. The second we announce a mating bond between enemy heirs, we'll have targets on our backs from every traditionalist in both packs. Maybe. Or maybe they'll see it as the miracle it is. His thumbs traced circles on her palms, the simple contact sending heat racing through her veins. 2 people finding love despite everything designed to keep them apart. The moon goddess bringing together what human hatred has torn asunder. Kira wanted to believe him. Every fiber of her being yearned to say yes, to take the leap of faith he was offering. But the alpha's daughter in her, the strategist trained from birth to think 3 moves ahead, saw only disaster. And if you're wrong, if instead of bringing peace, our bond triggers the war your father's already planning, then we face it together. Damon's voice was steady, absolute. As mates, as partners, as 2 people who chose love over fear. Before she could respond, the crack of a breaking branch outside made them both freeze. Footsteps circled the cabin. Too many footsteps for a single tracker. We have company, Damon breathed, his body shifting into a protective stance between Kira and the door. Kira Blackthorne. Marcus's voice boomed through the night. I know you're in there. Come out now, and we can discuss this like civilized wolves. Kira's heart sank. Not just Marcus. She could smell at least 3 other Blackthorne warriors surrounding the cabin. How did he find us? She whispered. Does it matter? Damon was already moving, gathering the documents from the table. Is there another way out? Kira shook her head. The cabin had been built for shelter, not escape. 60 seconds, Kira. Marcus called. Then we're coming in. Damon pressed the folder of stolen documents into her hands. Take these to your father. Show him what mine is planning. Make him understand that this is bigger than our feelings for each other. What about you? His smile was heartbreaking. I'll buy you time to get away. No. The word tore from her throat with surprising violence. I'm not leaving you to face them alone. You have to. This information is too important to risk. The cabin door exploded inward, and Marcus charged through with 3 other warriors at his back. Amber eyes blazed with fury as he took in the scene. Kira and Damon standing together, the scattered documents, the intimate setting. Traitor, Marcus snarled, and Kira wasn't sure if he was talking to her or Damon. Marcus, wait. Kira stepped forward, clutching the documents to her chest. You don't understand. He's trying to help us. His father is planning. I understand perfectly. Marcus's voice was deadly quiet. I understand that the Alpha's daughter has been seduced by enemy magic. That she's betrayed everything her bloodline stands for. It's not like that, isn't it? Marcus's gaze flicked between them, missing nothing. The scent bond is obvious, Kira. You reek of him. And him of you. One of the other warriors, a grizzled veteran named Sam, stepped forward with silver-bright claws extended. Should we kill the Silvermoon now, or bring him back for questioning? Neither. Marcus's expression was grim. We're taking them both to the Alpha. Let Thane Blackthorne decide what to do with his daughter and her companion. As the warriors moved to surround them, Damon caught Kira's hand for what might be the last time. "Whatever happens," he murmured, "remember what Elena wrote. Love is the only magic strong enough to break old curses. But only if we're brave enough to let it," Kira finished, her heart breaking. As they were led away from the cabin in chains forged from blessed silver, Kira clutched the stolen documents and prayed they contained enough truth to save both their peoples. Because she was about to bet everything, her life, her pack, her future, on the hope that love really could conquer hate. The alternative was too terrible to contemplate. Chapter 5. The great hall of the Blackthorne compound had never felt more like a courtroom. Kira knelt on the cold stone floor, silver manacles burning against her wrists as her father paced before the assembled pack council. Alpha Thane Blackthorne was a formidable man in the best of circumstances. 6.5 feet of muscle and scars, with eyes like winter storms and a presence that could make hardened warriors submit with a glance. In his current state of barely controlled rage, he was terrifying. Damon knelt beside her, his own chains heavy with enough blessed silver to suppress even an alpha's strength. Blood trickled from where the metal had burned his skin, but his expression remained defiant. Proud, as if he was exactly where he chose to be. "Explain to me," Alpha Thane said, his voice deadly quiet, "how my daughter, my heir, came to be found in a compromising position with the son of my greatest enemy." The stolen documents lay spread across the council table like evidence in a murder trial. Marcus had examined them thoroughly, his expression growing more troubled with each page. But whether that would be enough to save them remained to be seen. "The documents speak for themselves," Kira said, fighting to keep her voice steady. "Alpha Silvermoon is planning to use human military contractors to destroy our pack. Environmental contamination charges, federal intervention, forced relocation. I can read, daughter." Thane's interruption was sharp as a blade. "What I want to know is how you came to possess intelligence that even our best scouts couldn't gather, and why you were alone with the enemy prince to receive it." Kira's mouth went dry. This was the moment of truth, where she either found the courage to defend what she and Damon had built, or watched it crumble under the weight of pack law and tradition. "Because he sought me out. Because he's trying to prevent a massacre that would destroy both our peoples. And you believed him?" Cole's voice carried obvious skepticism. "The spawn of our enemies comes to you with convenient intelligence, and you accept it without question?" "Not without question." Damon spoke for the first time since their capture, his voice carrying across the hall with quiet authority. "Your daughter is too smart to be taken in by pretty lies. She questioned everything, demanded proof, made me work for every scrap of trust." Several council members exchanged glances. Even Marcus looked thoughtful. "So you admit to seducing the Alpha's daughter," another elder said. "I admit to finding my mate." Damon's words dropped into the silence like stones into still water. "And being found by her in return." The reaction was immediate and explosive. Shouts of outrage, demands for immediate execution, accusations of enemy magic and supernatural manipulation. Through it all, Alpha Thane remained silent, his storm-gray eyes fixed on his daughter's face. "Is it true?" he asked when the chaos finally died down. Kira met her father's gaze, drawing on every ounce of strength her bloodline had given her. "Yes, the mate bond is real. I can feel it in every breath, every heartbeat. He's mine and I'm his." "Then you've doomed us all." The words came from her uncle Marcus, and they hit like physical blows. "Do you have any idea what you've done? The laws you've broken? The traditions you've spat on?" "I know exactly what I've done." Kira's voice grew stronger, more certain. "I've found a way to save both our packs from destruction. The mate bond isn't just about us. It's about unity, healing, the chance to break cycles of hatred that have poisoned our kinds for generations." "Pretty words," Cole sneered. "But words won't stop a war. Words won't bring back the dead." "No," Damon said quietly. "But the truth might prevent more deaths. Alpha Blackthorne, I came here knowing I might not leave alive. But those documents prove my father has moved beyond honorable combat. He's planning genocide, using human weapons and human laws to achieve what claws and fangs couldn't. And why should we trust the word of a Silvermoon?" The question came from Sarah Clearwater, one of the few female council members. "Your bloodline has been synonymous with lies and treachery for 2 centuries. Because I'm risking everything to be here." Damon's chains rattled as he shifted, trying to ease the burn of blessed silver. My father will consider me a traitor for stealing those files. My pack will call for my blood when they discover what I've done. I have nothing to gain from lying to you. You have her. Marcus jerked his chin toward Kira. That's reason enough for any deception. You're right. Damon's admission surprised everyone. I would lie, cheat, steal, and kill to protect her. But not about this. Not when both our peoples hang in the balance. Alpha Thane moved to the table, studying the scattered documents with the focus of a predator examining tracks. Maps, correspondence, financial records, surveillance photos. All of it painted a picture of systematic preparation for war. These human contacts, he said finally. How long has your father been cultivating them? At least 2 years, based on what I could find. Probably longer. Damon's voice was steady, professional. The environmental contamination charges are just the opening move. Once humans have justification to intervene in supernatural affairs, precedent is set. Our autonomy becomes meaningless. And after they scatter the Blackthorns? My father's next targets would be the smaller packs. The isolated ones who can't mount effective resistance. Damon met the Alpha's gaze without flinching. Within a decade, every pack in North America would be under human oversight. Controlled. Neutered. The hall fell silent as the implications sank in. This wasn't just about ancient feuds anymore. This was about survival of their entire species. Assuming these documents are genuine, Alpha Thane said slowly, what would you have us do? Our kinds have been enemies since before living memory. The blood debt between our families can be paid. Kira's interruption drew every eye in the room. The old laws provide for it. A mating bond between heirs can settle any blood debt, no matter how ancient. Those laws haven't been invoked in over 3 centuries, Sarah protested. Because no heir has ever found their true mate among their enemies. Kira shot back. But we have. And that changes everything. Marcus stepped forward, his scarred face grim. Even if the council accepted such a union, which they won't, do you think Alpha Silvermoon will simply agree to peace because his son has betrayed him? No, Damon said quietly. My father will never accept peace willingly. But he might accept it if the alternative is exposure of his human connections. If both packs unite to reveal his treachery to the Grand Council. The Grand Council, the governing body that oversaw all North American packs. They met only in times of crisis, and their word was absolute law for all werewolf kind. You're talking about civil war, Cole said. Silvermoons who support the old Alpha against those who might accept your leadership. I'm talking about evolution. Damon's voice carried absolute conviction. Our kinds can't survive in isolation anymore. The human world is too connected, too invasive. We either learn to work together, or we fall separately. Alpha Thane was quiet for a long moment, studying the faces of his council members. When he spoke, his voice was carefully neutral. The council will deliberate. Guards will escort you both to separate cells while we decide your fate. Father, Kira began. The decision is made. Thane's tone brooked no argument. You've presented your case. Now we'll determine if love is worth the risk of everything we've built. As the guards moved forward to escort them away, Damon caught Kira's eyes one last time. Whatever happens, he said softly, I regret nothing. Neither do I, she whispered back. But as they were separated and led to different wings of the compound, Kira couldn't shake the feeling that their fate had already been decided. And it might not be the ending either of them had hoped for. Chapter 6. The cell beneath the Blackthorn compound was designed to hold the most dangerous supernatural criminals. Thick stone walls carved with binding runes, silver-lined bars that would burn any shifter who tried to escape, and complete isolation from the outside world. Kira had been here for 3 days, and the silence was driving her slowly insane. 3 days without word from the council. 3 days without knowing if Damon was alive or dead. 3 days of replaying every conversation, every stolen moment, every choice that had led them to this place. The sound of footsteps in the corridor made her heart leap. But instead of guards or council members, her father appeared at the cell door alone. Alpha Thane looked like he'd aged a decade in 3 days. New lines around his eyes, gray in his hair that hadn't been there before. Papa. The childhood name slipped out before she could stop it. Hello, little star. His use of her old pet name made her throat tight. How are you holding up? I've been better. She moved to the bars, studying his face for any clue about the council's decision. What's the verdict? That's complicated. Thane pulled a wooden chair closer to the cell and settled into it with a heavy sigh. The documents are genuine. Our intelligence confirms that Silvermoon has been meeting with human military contractors for months. The environmental contamination charges are already being filed. Kira's blood ran cold. How long do we have? Weeks, maybe less. Once the federal government gets involved. He spread his hands helplessly. We'll be fighting a war on two fronts. Against the Silvermoons and against human bureaucracy that doesn't understand what it's destroying. Then you have to accept the alliance. It's the only way. Is it? Thane leaned forward, his gray eyes intense. Tell me honestly, daughter. Is this really about saving our pack? Or is it about justifying feelings you know are forbidden? The question hit like a physical blow. Kira had been asking herself the same thing for days, torturing herself with doubts and second-guessing. I don't know, she admitted finally. I can't separate them anymore. What I feel for Damon, what I believe about the alliance, they're tangled together like roots of the same tree. At least you're honest. Thane's smile was sad. Do you know what your mother said when I told her about your situation? Kira's breath caught. Her mother had died when she was 12, but her memory remained a guiding force in the pack. She said that love worth dying for is also love worth living for. That maybe the moon goddess had finally sent us a way to heal old wounds. Thane reached through the bars to touch his daughter's hand. But she also said that the cost of healing might be higher than we're prepared to pay. What does that mean? It means the council is split. Half want you executed as a traitor. The other half think you might be our salvation. His grip tightened on her fingers. The deciding vote is mine. Kira's world tilted. Everything, her life, Damon's life, the future of both their packs, came down to her father's choice. What are you going to do? That depends on your answer to one question. Thane's voice was steady, but she could see the pain in his eyes. If I grant this alliance, if I accept your mating bond with the Silvermoon Prince, will you be strong enough to lead both packs when the time comes? Both packs. Did you think this would be simple? That you could unite 2 centuries of enemies without consequences? Thane's laugh was bitter. If this alliance happens, it won't be a merger of equals. It will be absorption. The stronger pack will dominate the weaker, whether we admit it or not. The implications hit her like an avalanche. You're talking about dissolving pack boundaries, creating something new. I'm talking about survival, about adapting or dying. Thane stood, beginning to pace in the narrow corridor. The old ways are ending, Kira. Human technology, global communication, satellite surveillance. Our kinds can't hide in the shadows much longer. We need to be strong enough to face that future united, or we'll face it alone and broken. And you think I can lead that transition? I think you're the only one who can. Your bloodline, your training, your unique perspective on Silvermoon's strengths and weaknesses. His smile was sharp. Plus, the mate bond gives you leverage that no traditional alliance could match. What about Damon? What does he think about all this? Why don't you ask him yourself? Thane moved to unlock the cell door. The council meeting resumes in 1 hour. You'll both have a chance to address them before the final vote. As the door swung open, Kira felt a mixture of hope and terror. This was their last chance to convince the council that love could indeed conquer hatred. She just prayed they were strong enough to handle the consequences of success. The great hall buzzed with tension as the assembled council took their seats. Word had spread throughout the compound. This wasn't just a trial anymore, but a moment that would define the future of werewolf kind in North America. Damon stood beside her at the center of the hall, and despite the silver burns on his wrists and the exhaustion in his eyes, he looked every inch the alpha he'd been born to be. When their fingers brushed, the contact sent electricity racing through her veins. Before we cast our votes, Alpha Thane announced, the accused will have one final opportunity to address the council. Kira stepped forward, her heart hammering against her ribs. Every face in the hall belonged to someone she'd known since childhood. Pack members who'd watched her grow up, who'd trusted her father to raise a worthy heir. Honored council, she began, her voice carrying clearly through the vaulted space. 3 days ago, you saw me as your future alpha. Today, you see me as a traitor. The truth is, I'm both. Murmurs rippled through the assembly, but she pressed on. I betrayed the hatred that has defined our pack for generations. I betrayed the assumption that Silvermoons are incapable of honor, loyalty, or love. I betrayed the comfortable certainty that our enemies could never become our allies. Her voice grew stronger. And I would betray those things again gladly, if it means saving the lives of everyone in this room. Pretty words, Cole interrupted. But betrayal is still betrayal, regardless of motivation. You're right, Damon said, stepping up beside her. Betrayal is exactly what this is. I betrayed my father's trust when I stole those documents. I betrayed my pack's expectations when I chose love over hatred. I betrayed every lesson I was taught about Blackthorn wolves being irredeemable enemies. He moved to the council table, where the stolen documents still lay spread like evidence of treason. But sometimes betrayal is the only way to expose a greater truth. My father isn't just planning to destroy the Blackthorns. He's planning to destroy everything that makes us what we are. Our independence, our culture, our very identity as free wolves. And you think an alliance will stop him? Marcus's question carried genuine curiosity rather than hostility. I think a united front will force him to choose between his hatred and his survival. Damon's voice was steady, confident. Present the Grand Council with evidence of human interference, backed by testimony from both packs, and even my father won't be able to deny the truth. Sarah Clearwater leaned forward. What makes you think he'll accept defeat gracefully? Men like that don't surrender easily. He won't surrender, Kira said. He'll fight, but he'll be fighting alone, against wolves who should have been his allies. And eventually, even the most stubborn alpha learns that some battles can't be won. And if he doesn't learn, Cole pressed. If he chooses war over wisdom? Kira and Damon exchanged glances. They'd discussed this possibility during their brief moments together before the council session. Then we'll stop him, Damon said simply. Together. As mates. As alphas of a united pack that's stronger than the sum of its parts. The hall fell silent. Every person in the room understood the implications. This wasn't just about alliance anymore. This was about revolution. About remaking their entire world from the ground up. Alpha Thane stood slowly. The council will vote. All in favor of accepting the alliance and recognizing the mating bond. Hands rose throughout the hall. Not all of them, but more than Kira had dared hope. Sarah Clearwater, several of the younger council members. Even some of the veterans who'd fought Silvermoons for decades. Opposed. Fewer hands this time, but including some of the most influential voices. Cole. 2 of the senior warriors, the pack's spiritual leader. Abstaining, Marcus raised his hand, along with 3 others. Alpha Thane nodded slowly. By a vote of 13-7, with 4 abstentions, this council accepts the proposed alliance with the Silvermoon pack and recognizes the mating bond between Kira Blackthorne and Damon Silvermoon. The hall erupted in cheers and arguments, celebration and protest. But all Kira could focus on was the feeling of Damon's hand in hers. The scent bond that wrapped around them like invisible armor. They'd won. Against all odds, love had triumphed over hatred. But as her father moved to remove their silver chains, his expression remained troubled. The real test begins now, he murmured. Convincing the Silvermoons will make this look easy. Kira squeezed Damon's hand tighter. Then it's a good thing we won't be facing them alone. No, Alpha Thane agreed. But before we can unite our packs, we need to survive the civil war that's coming. The celebration around them continued, but Kira felt a chill that had nothing to do with the mountain air outside. Their love had conquered the Blackthorn Council. Now they had to convince the Silvermoons, including an alpha who would rather see his son dead than mated to his greatest enemy. Chapter 7. The journey to Silvermoon territory took 2 days through the most treacherous mountain passes in Colorado. Kira rode beside Damon at the head of a delegation that would have been unthinkable a week ago. 5 Blackthorn warriors accompanying a Silvermoon prince home to face his father's judgment. Marcus had insisted on leading the escort, his scarred face grim as they navigated the narrow trail that separated enemy territories. This is madness, he'd muttered at least a dozen times since they'd crossed into neutral ground. Riding into the heart of Silvermoon lands with their prodigal son and our alpha's daughter. We'll be lucky if they don't string us up from the nearest tree. They won't, Damon said with more confidence than Kira felt. My father may be many things, but he's not stupid enough to execute a diplomatic party under flag of truce. Diplomatic party? Sam, one of the younger Blackthorn warriors, snorted. Is that what we're calling the suicide mission? Kira pulled her mount closer to Damon's, studying his profile as he gazed ahead at the mountain peaks that marked his homeland. 3 days ago, he'd been a prisoner facing execution. Now he was returning as a potential alpha with a Blackthorn mate and a plan to overthrow everything his pack had believed for generations. The weight of it all should have been crushing. Instead, Kira felt oddly calm. The mate bond hummed between them like a constant reassurance. Whatever they faced ahead, they'd face it together. "Tell me about your pack," she said softly. "What should I expect?" Damon's smile was complicated. "Silvermoons are different from Blackthorns. We value cunning over strength, strategy over direct confrontation. My father rules through alliances and obligations rather than pure dominance. Meaning he'll have had 3 days to prepare for our arrival. Every conversation will be a chess match, every gesture calculated for maximum effect." Damon's hand tightened on his reins. "And he'll use every tool at his disposal to prove that our mating bond is either false or the result of enemy manipulation." Marcus rode up alongside them. "What kind of tools?" "Pack magic, truth spells, possibly combat trials to test our resolve." Damon met the beta's gaze steadily. "Silvermoons don't accept anything at face value. They'll want proof that this alliance serves their interests. And if they decide it doesn't, then we fight our way out and hope the mountains are kinder than my father's hospitality." The Silvermoon compound appeared as they crested the final ridge. A collection of sleek, modern buildings nestled in a valley that looked like something from a fantasy novel. Where the Blackthorn territory favored rustic log construction and practical design, the Silvermoons had built something that belonged in an architectural magazine. "Impressive," Marcus admitted grudgingly. "My father believes in projecting strength through beauty," Damon explained. "Intimidation through elegance rather than raw power." They were met at the valley entrance by a patrol of Silvermoon warriors. 6 wolves in human form, all of them carrying the kind of casual confidence that spoke of absolute territorial security. Their leader, a woman with silver-streaked hair and eyes like winter ice, stepped forward as the party approached. "Prince Damon," she said, her voice carrying across the distance with alpha authority. "Your father has been expecting you." "Hello, Aunt Celeste." Damon's greeting was respectful but wary. "I trust he's prepared appropriate accommodations for our guests." Celeste's gaze swept over the Blackthorn delegation with obvious distaste. "Appropriate, yes. Comfortable." She shrugged. "That remains to be seen." As they were escorted through the compound, Kira tried not to gawk at the sophisticated architecture and carefully planned landscaping. Everything spoke of wealth, power, and a pack that had adapted to the modern world far more successfully than her own people. "Don't let the pretty buildings fool you," Damon murmured. "Silvermoons are still wolves. Still predators. They've just learned to hide their fangs behind better manners." The main lodge was a masterpiece of glass and steel that somehow managed to feel organic, as if it had grown from the mountain itself rather than being built upon it. Inside, the decor balanced modern luxury with traditional pack symbols. Ancient tapestries hung alongside abstract art, and the scent of old magic lingered beneath expensive perfumes. Alpha Victor Silvermoon waited for them in what could only be described as a throne room, though the furniture was too elegant to be called thrones. He sat behind a massive desk of polished black wood, every inch of him radiating the kind of power that made lesser wolves submit without conscious thought. Kira had expected him to look like an older version of Damon. Instead, she found herself facing a man who seemed carved from winter itself. Pale as snow, with silver hair and eyes like Arctic ice. Beautiful in the way that avalanches and blizzards were beautiful. "Deadly. My wayward son returns," Victor said, his voice carrying the refined accent of old European nobility. "And he brings such interesting companions." "Father." Damon stepped forward, his posture carefully neutral. Neither submissive nor challenging, but acknowledging the Alpha's authority while maintaining his own dignity. "Thank you for agreeing to this meeting. Did I have a choice? You steal classified documents, disappear for a week, then send word that you're bringing Blackthorn wolves under flag of truce." Victor's smile was sharp as a blade. "Either you've lost your mind, or something significant has changed." "Something significant has changed." Damon reached for Kira's hand, and she felt the electric thrill of contact even through her gloves. "Father, may I present Kira Blackthorn? My mate." The silence that followed was absolute. Victor's expression didn't change, but the temperature in the room seemed to drop several degrees. When he finally spoke, his voice was deadly quiet. "You're what?" "My mate," Damon repeated, his voice steady despite the obvious danger radiating from his father. "Recognized and accepted under the laws of the Moon Goddess. Witnessed by the Blackthorn Council and sealed by blood and scent." Victor rose from his chair with fluid grace, moving around the desk to study Kira like she was a particularly interesting specimen in a laboratory. She forced herself to remain still under his scrutiny, even as every instinct screamed at her to run. Kira Blackthorne, he mused, daughter of my greatest enemy, heir to a pack of barbarians who've spent 2 centuries trying to destroy everything I've built. His smile was colder than winter wind. How romantic. With respect, Alpha Silvermoon, Kira said, finding her voice despite the intimidation radiating from the man. Your definition of barbarians might need updating. My pack has voted to accept this alliance. Can yours say the same about embracing change? Victor's eyes narrowed. Clever. Using my own reputation for adaptability against me. I can see why my son finds you intriguing. This isn't about intrigue, Damon said. It's about survival. Both our packs face threats that go beyond ancient feuds. Ah yes, the mysterious documents you stole from my private files. Victor returned to his desk, pressing a button that brought up a holographic display. The very same intelligence reports Damon had taken. Did you really think I wouldn't notice sensitive material going missing? Kira's blood ran cold. If Victor had known about the theft all along. You let us take them, she realized. You wanted us to find that information. Victor's smile was genuinely pleased. Now that is interesting. Most wolves would have assumed they'd outsmarted me. But you see the deeper game. He gestured to the holographic files. The question is, what game do you think I'm playing? The room fell silent as the implications hit everyone at once. Nothing had been as simple as they'd thought. Victor Silvermoon, master manipulator, had been 3 moves ahead from the beginning. Why? Damon's voice was hoarse with betrayal. Because sometimes, my son, the only way to win an impossible game is to change the rules entirely. Victor's expression grew serious. The threats in those files are real. Human interference is inevitable. Our choices are adaptation or extinction. So you manipulated us into falling in love? Kira's anger was white-hot. Made us betray everything we believed in for your political convenience. My dear child, Victor said softly, you can't manipulate true love. You can only create the circumstances where it might flourish. His gaze moved between Kira and Damon. The mate bond between you is real. I simply ensured you'd have the opportunity to discover it. And if we'd chosen differently? Damon demanded. If we decided loyalty to our packs was more important than our feelings, then both our peoples would have died in the war that's coming. Victor's voice carried absolute conviction. Human military contractors, environmental agencies, federal oversight. It's all real, Damon. I've been preparing for this eventuality for years. By selling out the Blackthorns? By ensuring that when the storm hits, we'll be strong enough to weather it together. Victor moved to the window, gazing out at the mountain peaks that surrounded his territory. Alone, either pack might survive human interference. But they'd be broken, scattered, reduced to shadows of what they once were. Together, united by bonds stronger than law or tradition. We might actually have a chance, Kira finished, understanding flooding through her like ice water. Precisely. Victor turned back to face them. The question now is whether you're both strong enough to become the leaders this new world will require. Outside, a storm was gathering on the horizon, dark clouds rolling in from the west like an omen of things to come. Inside the elegant throne room, 2 centuries of hatred stood balanced on the edge of transformation. And somewhere in the distance, human forces prepared to intervene in a supernatural conflict they couldn't possibly understand. The real war was just beginning. Chapter 8. The ancient amphitheater carved into the mountainside had witnessed countless trials over the centuries. Tests of strength, cunning, and worthiness that determined who would lead the Silvermoon pack into each new generation. Tonight, under a blood-red moon that seemed to approve of the violence to come, it would witness something unprecedented. The trial of 2 alphas who claimed to be mates. Kira stood in the center of the stone circle, acutely aware of the hundreds of Silvermoon wolves surrounding her on the carved benches. Their eyes glowed with predatory interest, and she could smell their anticipation like copper in the air. Beside her, Damon was a pillar of calm strength, but she could feel the tension radiating from him through their bond. The trials will test 3 things, Victor announced from his position at the highest point of the amphitheater. His voice carried easily through the stone acoustics. Individual strength, shared cunning, and unified resolve. Failure in any category means death for both candidates. Marcus, who'd been allowed to witness as part of the Blackthorn delegation, leaned forward on his bench. His scarred face was grim with worry, and Kira didn't blame him. The Silvermoons had a reputation for trials that pushed candidates beyond their limits. The first trial, Victor continued, is combat. Each candidate will face 3 opponents simultaneously. Victory must be achieved without killing, a test of control as much as strength. 6 Silvermoon warriors entered the circle, all of them radiating the kind of dangerous competence that came from years of survival in one of the most politically complex packs in North America. Kira recognized the type, not the strongest wolves in the pack, but the smartest, the kind who won fights through strategy rather than brute force. "I'll take the left group," Damon murmured, his voice barely audible. "Don't get clever," Kira replied. "These aren't Blackthorn warriors. They'll adapt to whatever strategy you show them. Trust me." The words carried layers of meaning. Trust in his fighting skills, yes, but also trust in their bond, their partnership, their ability to function as a unified whole even when separated. A horn sounded, and the world exploded into motion. Kira's opponents came at her from 3 different angles. Classic Silvermoon pack tactics designed to overwhelm through coordination rather than individual strength. She rolled under the first attacker's lunge, using his momentum to send him crashing into the second warrior. The third tried to capitalize on her exposed position, but she was already moving, flowing like water between their attempts to pin her down. The key to fighting multiple opponents was never to let them surround you, never to engage in prolonged combat with any single enemy. Keep moving, keep them off balance, make them fight each other as much as they fought you. Her claws raked across the first warrior's ribs, deep enough to mark him as defeated without causing permanent damage. He dropped to one knee in acknowledgement, removing himself from the fight according to trial rules. 2 left. Across the circle, Damon danced through his own opponents with the fluid grace that marked alpha bloodlines. But Kira could see that he was struggling more than she was. His warriors had clearly studied his fighting style, adapting their tactics to counter his natural advantages. One of her remaining opponents tried to grab her from behind while the other attacked head-on. Kira dropped into a crouch, sweeping the legs of the frontal attacker while driving her elbow back into the ribs of the one behind her. The satisfying crack of displaced air told her she'd driven the breath from his lungs. But he was still standing, still fighting, and the one she'd knocked down was already rolling back to his feet. "Impressive," the standing warrior said, circling her like a predator. "But you fight like a Blackthorn, all power, no finesse." "Funny," Kira replied, tracking both opponents as they tried to flank her again. "I was just thinking you fight like a Silvermoon, all talk, no substance." The insult had its intended effect. Both warriors attacked simultaneously, their coordination suffering as anger clouded their judgment. Kira used their momentum against them, grabbing the first attacker's extended arm and using it as a pivot point to swing her entire body around, her feet connecting with the second warrior's chest in a devastating kick that sent him flying. The first warrior tried to capitalize on her extended position, but she was already inside his guard, her claws pressed against his throat. "Yield," she said softly. He nodded, and she released him to turn and check on Damon. He was down to 1 opponent, but that opponent was proving problematic. Taller and heavier than Damon, with reach that kept him at a disadvantage in close combat. Worse, the warrior was fighting defensively, making Damon come to him and burning energy with each failed attack. Kira started to move toward them, but a sharp gesture from Victor stopped her. This was Damon's fight to finish. "Come on," she whispered, knowing he could hear her even across the circle. "Stop fighting his fight. Make him fight yours." Something shifted in Damon's stance. Instead of pressing his attack, he began to circle, forcing his opponent to turn and move. The warrior was strong, but strength meant weight, and weight meant he tired faster than someone with Damon's lean build. After 2 minutes of constant movement, the warrior's breathing grew labored. His defensive posture began to slip as fatigue set in. And when he overextended on a counterpunch, Damon was there, slipping inside his guard to press claws against the vulnerable throat. "Yield." The warrior nodded, and the first trial was complete. "Acceptable," Victor announced, though his tone suggested it had been barely so. "The second trial tests cunning and cooperation. You will be given a puzzle that can only be solved by working together. Failure means death by poison. The substance you'll be given has no antidote save the completion of the trial." 2 crystal vials were brought forward, each containing a liquid that glowed with unnatural light. Kira's nose wrinkled at the scent, something that smelled like burnt copper and dying flowers. Nightshade essence, Damon identified grimly. Mixed with silver particles for extra potency. We'll have maybe an hour before it kills us. Then we'd better be very clever very quickly. Kira accepted her vial, noting the way the liquid seemed to pulse with its own malevolent life. What's the puzzle? Victor gestured to a section of the amphitheater wall where ancient symbols had been carved into the stone. The prophecy of the United Pacts, written by the first alpha of our bloodline. Translate it correctly, and the antidote will be revealed. Fail, he shrugged eloquently. Kira stared at the wall of symbols, her heart sinking. She could read some of the ancient script. Every alpha heir learned the old languages. But this was far more complex than anything she'd studied. On 3, Damon asked, raising his vial. Together, she agreed. They drank simultaneously, and immediately Kira felt the poison begin its work. A burning sensation spread from her stomach through her chest, and her vision started to swim. Beside her, Damon swayed but remained standing. The symbols, she said, forcing herself to focus. Some of them are Silvermoon script, others look like old Blackthorne. But there are characters I don't recognize. Pre-schism language, Damon said, his voice already growing rough. From before our pack split. Look at the pattern, it's not random. There's a mathematical progression. Kira studied the wall, trying to ignore the way her hands were beginning to shake. Every third symbol is repeated, and the spacing between repetitions is decreasing. A countdown, Damon realized. But counting down to what? The poison was working faster now. Kira could feel her heartbeat becoming irregular, her breathing shallow. They had minutes, maybe less. The prophecy isn't about the past, she said suddenly. It's about now. About us. She pointed to a series of symbols near the center of the wall. Moonbond. Pack unity. New beginning. And this section here, Damon added, moving closer to the wall despite his obvious weakness. Trial by fire. Strength through sacrifice. Love conquers hatred. It's not just a prophecy, Kira breathed. It's instructions. A recipe. She traced the symbols with her finger, feeling the rough stone warm under her touch. Press the symbols in order of the mathematical progression. Working together, their hands often overlapping as they reached for the same carved letters, they began to activate the wall. Each symbol glowed as it was touched, and gradually a pattern emerged. A spiral that led to a central point where 2 symbols were carved overlapping. Blackthorne and Silvermoon. United. They pressed the final symbols together, their hands intertwined, and the wall shuddered. A hidden panel slid open, revealing 2 more crystal vials. These filled with clear liquid that smelled like mountain streams and new growth. The antidote. They drank without hesitation, and almost immediately the burning in Kira's chest began to ease. Color returned to Damon's face, and his breathing steadied. Well done, Victor said, and for the first time he sounded genuinely impressed. The third trial, however, will test something far more precious than strength or cunning. What's left? Kira asked, though she suspected she already knew the answer. Your bond itself. Your willingness to sacrifice everything for each other, even if it means destroying what you claim to want to save. Guard stepped forward, and Kira felt silver chains once again binding her wrists. But this time, they were separating her from Damon, leading them to opposite sides of the amphitheater. The final trial, Victor announced, is choice. Each of you will be given the power to save your beloved's life, but only at the cost of destroying their pack. Choose wisely. The lives of everyone you've ever loved hang in the balance. As she was led away from Damon, their eyes met across the stone circle. In his gaze, she saw the same desperate love, the same impossible choice that was tearing her apart. Save the man she loved, or save her people. The trial that would determine not just their worthiness to lead, but whether their love was strong enough to survive the ultimate test. Chapter 9. The chamber they locked Kira in was carved from solid rock, its walls covered with murals that depicted the history of pack warfare. Wolves tearing each other apart in scenes of brutal beauty that had been painted in pigments mixed with actual blood. She sat on the single stone bench, her wrists still burning from the silver chains, and tried not to think about what was happening to Damon in whatever mirror chamber held him. The door opened with a grinding of ancient hinges, and Victor Silvermoon entered alone. In his hands, he carried an ornate silver dagger whose blade gleamed with supernatural sharpness. The final trial begins now, he said, settling gracefully onto the bench across from her. Do you know what this is? Kira stared at the blade, recognition sending ice through her veins. The heart ripper. The ceremonial weapon used to execute traitors. Among other things. Victor's smile was thin and cold. It's also capable of severing pack bonds permanently. One cut, properly placed, and your connection to the Blackthorn pack. Everything that makes you who you are would be gone forever. And why would I want that? Because in exactly 10 minutes, I'm going to order the execution of every Blackthorn wolf currently in my territory. Your Marcus, your fellow warriors, and anyone else who's ever shown you loyalty. Victor's voice was conversational, as if they were discussing the weather. Unless, of course, you choose to save them. Kira's hands clenched into fists. What's the price? Simple. Use the heart ripper to sever your pack bonds. Become truly Silvermoon, with no divided loyalties. Pledge your absolute allegiance to me and mine. The blade glinted as he turned it in the torchlight. Do that, and your friends live. Refuse, and they die screaming. And Damon. Ah yes, your beloved mate. Victor's expression grew contemplative. He's facing his own choice right now. Save you or save his pack. Interesting to see which of you values love over loyalty more highly. The implications hit her like a physical blow. They were being forced to choose between each other and their people. The ultimate test of where their true allegiances lay. You're bluffing, Kira said, though her voice lacked conviction. You need this alliance as much as we do. Killing my people would demonstrate that I'm willing to do whatever it takes to ensure Silvermoon's survival. Victor leaned forward, his pale eyes boring into hers. Your pack voted to accept this alliance by a narrow margin, didn't they? 13-7, with 4 abstentions. Hardly a mandate for radical change. The fact that he knew the exact vote count shouldn't have surprised her, but it did. How deep did his intelligence network run? Meanwhile, Victor continued, my pack remains skeptical of Blackthorn trustworthiness. They see your people as primitive barbarians who'll betray us the moment it becomes convenient. Executing your delegation would actually strengthen my position among the traditionalists. Then why offer me the choice at all? Because I'm curious to see what you'll choose. Love or loyalty? Your mate or your pack? Victor stood, placing the heart ripper on the bench beside her. You have 10 minutes. Choose wisely. After he left, Kira stared at the silver blade as if it were a venomous snake. Around her, the painted wolves on the walls seemed to snarl their disapproval of her cowardice. Heroes didn't hesitate when the choice was clear. Heroes sacrificed themselves for the greater good. But this wasn't about heroism. This was about love, and love made cowards of them all. 8 minutes. She picked up the dagger, testing its weight. The silver burned her palm, but she forced herself to maintain her grip. One cut, one moment of pain, and Marcus would live. Her fellow warriors would return to Blackthorn territory. Her people would survive, even if they never forgave her for choosing a Silvermoon over them. But what about Damon? If she severed her pack bonds, would their mate bond survive? Or would she lose both him and her people in one terrible instant? 6 minutes. Footsteps in the corridor. Victor returning to collect his answer, or guards coming to drag her to witness the execution of her friends. The door opened, but instead of Victor, Damon stumbled into the chamber. His clothes were torn, and fresh blood marked his face and hands. Behind him came 2 Silvermoon guards, their expressions grim. Kira. He rushed to her side, and she felt the electric thrill of contact as he gathered her into his arms. Thank God you're alive. I thought, when they brought me the choice. What choice? But even as she asked, she knew. The same impossible decision that had been tearing her apart. Sever my pack bonds and pledge absolute loyalty to your father, or watch you die. Damon's voice was rough with pain. They gave me the same blade, the same 10 minutes. What did you choose? I refused. I couldn't betray my pack, even for you. I hoped there had to be another way. His eyes found the heart ripper in her hands. But you were going to do it. You were going to save Marcus and the others. I don't know. The admission tore from her throat like a confession. I picked up the blade, but I couldn't. God, Damon, I don't know what I would have chosen. Then you both failed the test. Victor's voice came from the doorway, but when Kira looked up, his expression wasn't the cold satisfaction she'd expected. Instead, he looked almost proud. I don't understand, she said. The final trial wasn't about sacrifice, Victor explained, stepping into the chamber. It was about recognizing false choices. about understanding that sometimes the only winning move is to refuse to play the game. The guards who'd escorted Damon stepped forward, and Kira tensed for violence. Instead, they began removing the silver chains from both their wrists. You see, Victor continued, anyone can make hard choices when the options are clear. But leaders, true leaders, find third options when everyone else sees only two paths to disaster. So this was all theater? Damon's voice carried equal parts relief and anger. Another manipulation? A necessary test. Your mate bonds are real, your feelings genuine. But feelings alone don't make someone worthy to lead a united pack. Victor moved to the painted walls, tracing the outline of one of the battling wolves. Elena and James loved each other deeply, but when faced with similar choices, they chose personal happiness over their people's welfare. Their love became selfishness, and both packs suffered for it. And we passed because we couldn't choose. Kira was still trying to process what had happened. You passed because you both refused to accept that love and loyalty had to be mutually exclusive. Because you looked for options beyond the ones I offered. Victor's smile was genuinely warm for the first time since they'd arrived. That's the kind of thinking we'll need in the war that's coming. As if summoned by his words, the sound of helicopter rotors echoed through the mountain valley. Everyone in the chamber froze, listening to the unmistakable approach of multiple aircraft. What is that? Damon asked. Victor moved to the chamber's single window, his expression growing grim as he peered out at the valley below. Our time just ran out. The human forces have arrived. Kira joined him at the window, her heart sinking as she saw the tactical helicopters settling on the valley floor. Soldiers in full combat gear were already deploying, setting up what looked like a command post. How many? Damon asked. Enough. Victor turned away from the window, his demeanor shifting from Pack Alpha to war leader. The environmental contamination charges were filed this morning. Federal marshals, EPA enforcement teams, and military contractors hired to oversee the cleanup of both our territories. They're moving against both packs. Kira felt a chill that had nothing to do with the mountain air. Simultaneously, while we've been conducting trials, they've been implementing the final phase of their plan. Victor's voice was grim. The humans have decided that werewolf politics are too dangerous to ignore any longer. Outside, searchlights blazed to life, turning the valley into a scene from a science fiction nightmare. Loudspeakers crackled with official announcements about evacuation procedures and federal authority. So what do we do? Damon asked. Victor's smile was sharp as a blade. We show them what happens when they threaten our families. All of our families. As they prepared to leave the chamber, Kira felt the weight of destiny settling around her like a mantle. The trials were over, but the real test was just beginning. United or divided, the packs would face this new threat. And the choices they made in the next few hours would determine whether werewolf kind had a future in the modern world. Chapter 10. The War Council convened in the Silvermoon Compound's command center, a high-tech facility that wouldn't have looked out of place in a military installation. Screens displayed real-time satellite feeds of both pack territories, showing the extent of human deployment with ruthless clarity. It was worse than they'd imagined. Blackthorne territory is completely surrounded, reported Elena Clearwater, Victor's chief intelligence officer. 12 helicopters, approximately 200 personnel, and enough firepower to level a small city. Kira stared at the feeds, showing her homeland under siege. The log buildings of her family's compound looked primitive and vulnerable compared to the advanced technology arrayed against them. What about evacuation routes? She asked. Blocked. They've positioned teams at every mountain pass, every back trail. Elena's expression was grim. Your people are trapped. Damon moved to another screen showing Silvermoon territory. We're not much better off. They've got us contained, but not surrounded, probably planning to use us as leverage against the Blackthorns. Or vice versa, Victor said quietly. Make each pack think the other has been compromised, prevent any possibility of unified resistance. Marcus, who'd been standing silently near the back of the room, stepped forward. What's their endgame? They can't just massacre two entire packs. There'd be too many questions. They don't need to massacre anyone, Victor replied. Environmental contamination gives them legal authority to relocate entire populations. Once we're scattered to different facilities, separated from our territories and each other, we cease to exist as organized packs, Kira finished. Become refugees dependent on human goodwill for survival. Exactly. And refugees don't pose much threat to anyone. The room fell silent as the implications sank in. Everything they'd worked for, everything their ancestors had built, was about to be erased with legal paperwork and overwhelming force. There has to be something we can do, Damon said. Some way to fight back. Against the federal government? Elena shook her head. We're strong, but we're not bulletproof. And they've brought enough firepower to turn both territories into craters. Then we don't fight them head-on, Kira said suddenly. We make them fight each other. Every eye in the room turned toward her. Explain, Victor said. They're using legal authority to justify military action. But what if that authority was challenged? What if their environmental contamination evidence was proven false? Kira moved to the central display, pulling up the files Damon had stolen from his father's office. These documents prove the contamination was artificially created. Planted evidence, falsified reports, bribed inspectors. So, Marcus asked, even if we could prove it, who would we prove it to? The same government agencies they've already corrupted. Not government agencies, Damon said, understanding dawning in his eyes. Media, social networks, the court of public opinion. Think about it, Kira continued, excitement building in her voice. Government forces moving against indigenous populations based on falsified evidence? Military contractors profiting from manufactured crises? This isn't just our story. It's exactly the kind of scandal that humans love to expose. Victor's smile was sharp and predatory. Interesting. But how do we get the information out? Our communications are certainly being monitored. We don't need to get it out, Damon said. We need to make them bring it to us. He moved to the communications console, his fingers flying over the controls. What if we invited them in? Made ourselves so visible, so obviously newsworthy, that they couldn't ignore us. You want to surrender? Elena sounded horrified. I want to perform, Damon corrected. Give them exactly what they're not expecting. A mating ceremony between the heirs of enemy packs, broadcast live to the world. The room erupted in protests and objections, but Victor held up a hand for silence. Continue. Human fascination with werewolf culture is at an all-time high, Kira said, picking up Damon's thread. Reality shows, documentaries, social media influencers, they can't get enough of us. A mating ceremony between enemy heirs? That's the kind of content that goes viral in minutes. And once we have global attention, Damon added, we release the evidence of government corruption. Military contractors, falsified reports, manufactured environmental disasters, all of it. Turn the hunters into the hunted, Victor mused. I like it, but the timing would have to be perfect. Once we go public, there's no taking it back. Then we'd better make sure we get it right. Kira felt the familiar electric thrill that came with dangerous plans falling into place. How quickly can we set up a broadcast? Give me an hour, Elena said, already moving toward the communications equipment. I can patch into every major social media platform, plus a few underground networks that specialize in supernatural content. What about the ceremony itself? Marcus asked. Mating rituals are sacred, private, making them into a public spectacle. Sometimes tradition has to bend for survival, Victor said quietly. And sometimes the best way to honor the past is to ensure there's a future. As the room exploded into activity, technicians setting up broadcast equipment, intelligence officers preparing evidence packets, warriors positioning themselves for the chaos that would inevitably follow. Kira found herself alone with Damon near the main viewing screen. Are you sure about this? He asked softly. Once we do this, there's no going back. Our mating bond becomes public property, our private moments turned into entertainment. I'm sure. Kira reached for his hand, feeling the familiar spark of contact. But are you? Your father orchestrated our meeting, manipulated our circumstances. How do we know this isn't just another part of his plan? Damon was quiet for a long moment, his gaze fixed on the screens showing human forces surrounding their territories. Does it matter? Manipulation or not, what I feel for you is real. What we've built together, that's ours, regardless of how it started. And if this plan fails, if we can't expose the corruption in time, then we face whatever comes next together. As mates, as partners, as leaders of a people who refuse to disappear quietly into the night. Outside, the sound of helicopters grew louder as more human forces arrived. Inside, the preparations for the most important broadcast in werewolf history continued with desperate efficiency. In less than an hour, They would either save their people or doom them all. But as Kira looked into Damon's eyes, she felt something she hadn't experienced since this whole crisis began. Hope. They'd passed the trials, proven their worth as leaders, survived betrayal, manipulation, and impossible choices. Now it was time to show the world what united wolves could accomplish. The revolution would be televised. Chapter 11. The ancient stone circle where Kira and Damon had first kissed had been transformed into something between a sacred temple and a television studio. Cameras mounted on silent drones circled overhead, their feeds streaming to servers that would broadcast to millions of viewers worldwide. Silvermoon technicians had worked miracles in the past hour, turning a simple mountain clearing into the nerve center of what might be the most important media event in werewolf history. Kira stood at the edge of the circle, wearing a dress that had belonged to her grandmother, white silk embroidered with silver threads that caught the moonlight like captured stars. Beside her, Damon wore the ceremonial robes of a Silvermoon heir, deep blue fabric that seemed to shimmer with its own inner light. Viewer count is climbing exponentially, Elena reported from her mobile command station. 2 million and counting. #werewolf wedding is trending globally. Any word from the human forces? Victor asked, his own formal attire making him look more like a movie star than a pack alpha planning treason. Radio chatter suggests confusion in their command structure. They weren't expecting a public ceremony. Elena's fingers flew over her tablet. But they're repositioning, moving closer to the circle. How long do we have? Kira asked, fighting to keep her voice steady. 20 minutes, maybe less, before they move to shut us down. Elena looked up from her screens. The evidence packets are queued and ready. Once the ceremony reaches its peak, we'll flood every major news outlet simultaneously. Damon took Kira's hand, the contact sending familiar electricity racing through her veins. Are you ready for this? To save our people by turning our most private moment into a global spectacle? Kira's laugh was shaky. Not even close. But let's do it anyway. As they walked into the stone circle, the weight of history settled around them. How many werewolf couples had performed this ritual in secret, hidden from human eyes? How many had died defending the privacy of their most sacred traditions? Tonight, they were breaking every rule their ancestors had died to protect. And somehow it felt like exactly what those ancestors would have wanted. The ceremony began with the traditional elements: the calling of the moon, the recognition of lineage, the formal presentation of the mates to their respective pack spirits. But even as they spoke words unchanged for centuries, Kira was acutely aware of the cameras capturing every gesture, every expression. Do you know what my great-grandmother Elena wrote in her final letter? Damon said, departing from the traditional script. His voice carried clearly in the mountain air, projected by hidden speakers to reach the human forces surrounding them. Tell me, Kira replied, though she already knew. This was for the cameras, for the audience that would ultimately judge their cause. She wrote, "Love is the only magic strong enough to break old curses, but only if we're brave enough to let it." Damon's eyes found hers across the circle. Tonight, we honor her memory by choosing courage over fear, unity over division. Your courage, came a new voice, amplified by military-grade speakers. Ends now. Colonel James Harrison stepped into the circle's edge, flanked by a dozen soldiers in full tactical gear. His weathered face was grim beneath his Kevlar helmet, and the assault rifle in his hands was trained directly on Kira's heart. By authority of the Federal Environmental Protection Agency, this gathering is declared an illegal assembly on contaminated federal land. You will disperse immediately or face arrest. Contaminated by what exactly? Victor asked, stepping forward with the confidence of a man who'd spent decades manipulating conversations to his advantage. Perhaps you could specify the nature of the contamination for our global audience? Harrison's eyes flicked to the cameras, clearly uncomfortable with the public nature of the confrontation. That information is classified. How convenient, Damon said. Classified contamination that requires immediate military intervention. Tell me, Colonel, how many environmental disasters require assault rifles to clean up? This is not a debate. Harrison's voice carried the authority of a man accustomed to unquestioning obedience. You have 60 seconds to surrender, or we will use whatever force is necessary to secure this area. On Elena's screens, the viewer count had climbed past 10 million. Social media was exploding with commentary, theories, and increasingly angry questions about why the military was interrupting what appeared to be a peaceful wedding ceremony. Force against what? Kira asked, her voice carrying both pain and defiance. Two people in love? Families trying to make peace? What exactly are we threatening, Colonel Harrison? You're threatening the security of... Harrison caught himself, clearly realizing that anything he said would be broadcast to millions of increasingly skeptical viewers. The security of what? Damon pressed. Your profits? Your ability to steal indigenous land using falsified environmental reports. Harrison's finger moved toward his trigger, but before he could fire, Elena's voice cut through the tension like a blade. Evidence release initiated. Uploading to all major platforms now. On screens around the world, documents began appearing. Financial records, falsified environmental reports, communications between military contractors and government officials. The evidence Damon had stolen from his father's files, combined with intelligence the Silvermoons had been gathering for months. The reaction was immediate and explosive. #environmental fraud began trending alongside #werewolf wedding. News anchors started reading the documents live on air. Politicians began distancing themselves from what was rapidly becoming a massive scandal. Clever, Harrison admitted, his weapons still trained on Kira. But it changes nothing. My orders are clear. Your orders, came a new voice from the darkness beyond the circle, are revoked. General Patricia Mills stepped into the light, her uniform bearing enough decorations to outfit a small army. Behind her came a full complement of federal marshals and what appeared to be half the FBI. Colonel Harrison, you and your men are under arrest for conspiracy, fraud, and violation of the Posse Comitatus Act. Mills's voice was cold as winter steel. Weapons down. Now, the standoff that followed felt like it lasted hours, though it couldn't have been more than seconds. Harrison's men looked between their colonel and the general, uncertain which authority to follow. Stand down, Harrison said finally, his voice heavy with defeat. All units stand down. As the soldiers lowered their weapons, General Mills approached the stone circle with something approaching reverence. Ms. Blackthorne, Mr. Silvermoon, on behalf of the United States government, I apologize for this interference in your ceremony. The operations against your territories have been suspended pending a full investigation. And our people? Kira asked, hardly daring to hope. Will be returned to their lands immediately, with full federal protection while we sort out this mess. Mills's expression was grim. It appears certain contractors have been using government authority to pursue their own agendas. That stops now. The relief was overwhelming, but Kira forced herself to remain focused. What about our autonomy? Our right to govern our own territories? That's a conversation for another day, Mills said. Right now, I suggest you finish your ceremony. The whole world is watching, and frankly, after the last hour, we could all use a happy ending. As the military forces withdrew, leaving them alone in the stone circle under the eyes of cameras and the light of the full moon, Damon turned to Kira with wonder in his eyes. We did it, he said softly. We actually did it. We're not finished yet, she replied, but her smile was radiant. We still have a mating bond to complete. Then let's give them a show they'll never forget. What followed was the most public declaration of love in werewolf history, broadcast live to an audience that had grown to over 50 million viewers. When they spoke the final vows that would bind their souls for eternity, when they exchanged the ritual marks that proclaimed them mated before gods and wolves alike, the entire world watched two enemies become lovers, two packs become one. But for Kira and Damon, surrounded by ancient stones under starlight older than human civilization, there was only each other. Only the electric thrill of the mate bond settling into place like the final piece of a cosmic puzzle. Only love, triumphant at last over every force that had tried to keep them apart. As they kissed to seal their union, fireworks exploded overhead. Not the planned pyrotechnics of a celebration, but the spontaneous joy of two packs finally free to celebrate together. The war was over. The future had begun. And it started with a love story that had captured the world. Chapter 12. 6 months later. The new pack house rose from the valley floor like something from a fairy tale. A magnificent structure that blended the rustic strength of Blackthorne architecture with the elegant sophistication of Silvermoon design. Glass and steel married ancient timber in soaring lines that reached toward the mountain peaks, while traditional pack banners flew alongside solar panels and satellite dishes. Kira stood on the central balcony, watching the organized chaos below as construction crews put the finishing touches on what would be the first truly integrated werewolf community in North America. Blackthorne and Silvermoon wolves worked side by side, their old enmities slowly giving way to grudging respect and, in some cases, genuine friendship. "The media's calling it the moonbound miracle," Damon said, joining her at the railing. Even after 6 months of marriage, his presence still sent electric thrills through her veins. The mate bond had only grown stronger with time, deeper and more complex than anything she'd imagined possible. "Better than the great werewolf merger," she replied, leaning into his warmth. "Though I still think love conquers all is a bit too cheesy, even for human media," says the woman who's been featured on the cover of every supernatural magazine in existence. Damon's arms came around her from behind, and she felt his smile against her neck. How does it feel to be the most famous werewolf in the world? Terrifying, overwhelming, completely surreal. Kira turned in his embrace, studying the face that had become more precious to her than breathing. But worth it if it means our people have a future. And they did have a future, though it looked nothing like what either pack had imagined. The media attention from their wedding had triggered a global conversation about supernatural rights, environmental protection, and government accountability. The military contractors responsible for the false contamination charges were facing federal prosecution. Several politicians had resigned in disgrace. And for the first time in centuries, werewolves were stepping out of the shadows to claim their place in the modern world. "The integration reports came in this morning," Damon said, pulling out a tablet loaded with statistics that would have been impossible to imagine a year ago. 93% of both packs have chosen to remain in the unified territory. Only a handful of the oldest traditionalists have relocated to other communities. What about the challenges? The disputes? Fewer than expected, actually. Your idea about mixed patrols is working. Hard to maintain old prejudices when you're depending on your former enemies to watch your back. Damon scrolled through more data. And the economic integration is exceeding all projections. Turns out Blackthorne wilderness skills and Silvermoon technology make a powerful combination. From their vantage point, Kira could see evidence of that combination everywhere. Solar-powered cabins hidden among ancient trees. Smartphone towers disguised as pine trees. Traditional hunting grounds now protected by sophisticated security systems that kept human intrusion to a minimum while allowing the media access needed to maintain public support. "Sometimes I can't believe we pulled this off," she said. "We had help." Damon gestured toward the construction site, where Victor Silvermoon was deep in conversation with Alpha Thane about foundation specifications. The two former enemies had become unlikely allies, bonding over their shared desire to build something better for their children. "Speaking of which," Damon continued, his voice taking on a note she'd learned to recognize, "there's something we need to discuss." "Oh no, I know that tone. What fresh crisis requires our attention? Not a crisis, an opportunity." Damon turned her to face him fully, his expression suddenly serious. "The Grand Council has officially recognized our unified pack. They're offering us a seat on the Continental Authority." Kira's breath caught. The Continental Authority was the governing body for all werewolf packs in North America, a position of tremendous influence and responsibility. "They want us to be the poster couple for supernatural integration," she said slowly. "They want us to be the bridge between the old ways and the new world, to help other packs navigate the changes that are coming whether we're ready or not." It was a massive responsibility, the kind of role that would define not just their lives, but the future of their species. "And yet, when do we start?" Kira asked. Damon's grin was brilliant. "I was hoping you'd say that. The formal installation is next month, but we'll need to begin traveling almost immediately. There are packs from Alaska to Mexico dealing with their own integration challenges. Then we'd better get moving." Kira kissed him softly, tasting the future on his lips. "Though I have to warn you, if we're going to be the public face of werewolf evolution, you're going to have to get used to even more cameras. As long as you're beside me, I can handle anything the world throws at us." As if summoned by their conversation, Elena appeared on the balcony with a tablet and an expression of barely contained excitement. "You're going to want to see this," she said, pulling up a news feed from the BBC. "The European Parliament just passed the Supernatural Recognition Act. Full legal rights, territorial protections, the works. And they're crediting your wedding broadcast as the catalyst for the entire movement. On the screen, politicians were giving speeches about tolerance, integration, and the need to embrace a world that was more magical than they'd ever imagined. Comments scrolled past from viewers around the globe. Humans expressing wonder, curiosity, and overwhelmingly, support for the supernatural communities that had hidden among them for so long. "It's working," Kira breathed. "It's actually working." "Better than working," Damon said, pulling her close as they watched the dawn of a new age unfold on screens around the world. "It's revolutionary." From the valley below, a howl rose into the afternoon air. Not a cry of war or territorial challenge, but a song of celebration that was quickly taken up by voices throughout the pack lands. Blackthorne and Silvermoon wolves joined their voices in harmony, creating something beautiful and new from the ashes of ancient hatred. As the song reached its crescendo, Kira felt a familiar stirring deep in her consciousness. The mate bond that connected her to Damon was changing, evolving, becoming something more than the sum of its parts. "Do you feel that?" she whispered. "The bond's deepening," he confirmed, wonder in his voice. "It's like it's reaching out to include the whole pack." Around them, other mated pairs were experiencing the same phenomenon. The ancient magic that had bound individual wolves was expanding, creating a network of connection that linked every member of their unified community. A pack bond, Kira realized. Not just between us, but between everyone who's chosen to be part of this new beginning. "Elena and James would be proud," Damon said softly. Their sacrifice finally led to something beautiful. As the sun set behind the mountain peaks, painting the sky in shades of gold and crimson, Kira and Damon stood together on the balcony of their new world. Below them, their people worked and laughed and built something unprecedented in werewolf history. Around them, the ancient mountains stood sentinel over a community that had chosen love over hatred, unity over division. And in the distance, barely audible but growing stronger each day, came the sound of other packs taking up their song. Other communities choosing to step out of the shadows. Other wolves deciding that the future was worth the risk of exposure. The revolution that had begun with a forbidden love in a moonlit forest was spreading across the continent, carried by the power of hope and the unshakable belief that love really could conquer all. "So what happens now?" Kira asked, though she thought she already knew the answer. "Now," Damon said, his voice rich with promise and possibility, "we change the world." And as the first stars appeared in the darkening sky, their light reflecting off the glass and steel of their new home, Kira knew he was right. They'd already changed everything that mattered. The rest was just details. 5 years later, the nursery overlooked the same valley where two enemy packs had once faced each other across centuries of hatred. Now, as dawn painted the mountains in shades of rose and gold, Kira stood at the window holding the future in her arms. "She has your eyes," Damon said softly, joining her at the window. Their daughter, Luna Elena Blackthorne Silvermoon, gurgled contentedly, her tiny fist wrapped around her father's finger with the fierce grip that already marked her as alpha-born. "And your stubborn streak," Kira replied, watching their 3-year-old son chase fireflies in the garden below. Marcus James, named for both their lost friend and the ancestor whose sacrifice had paved their way, had inherited the best traits of both bloodlines. Blackthorn strength and Silvermoon cunning, wrapped in a package of pure mischief. "The documentary crews arrive tomorrow," Damon reminded her, though his tone suggested he was as reluctant as she was to share their private moments with the world yet again. "Moonbound Hearts, 5 years later," Kira quoted the title with amusement. "They're calling it the most important supernatural documentary of the decade, because our love story has become everyone's love story." Damon's arms encircled both her and their daughter, creating a circle of warmth against the mountain morning. "Do you ever regret it? The publicity, the constant attention, the way our private lives became public property." Kira considered the question as she watched the sun rise over their valley. A valley that now housed nearly 3,000 wolves from 47 different packs, all of them drawn by the promise of a new way of living. The integration model they'd pioneered had been replicated across 6 continents. Supernatural rights legislation bore their names in a dozen countries. Universities offered courses in Blackthorne Silvermoon integration theory. "Ask me again when they're old enough to understand what we gave up for them," she said, pressing a kiss to Luna's downy head. "And what we gained," Damon added. From the garden below, young Marcus's laughter drifted up to them. Pure joy unmarked by the prejudices that had poisoned their own childhoods. He was playing with children whose grandparents had been mortal enemies, building friendships that would have been impossible in the old world. The European Council wants us to address their annual summit, Damon said, producing a formal invitation from his pocket. Theme is love as revolution, the continuing transformation of supernatural society. Catchy, Kira said dryly, though I suppose it's accurate. Their story had indeed become more than personal history. It was taught in schools as an example of how individuals could change entire civilizations. The moonbound effect was studied by sociologists, anthropologists, and political scientists trying to understand how one wedding broadcast had triggered a global supernatural rights movement. There's something else, Damon said, his voice taking on the tone that usually preceded significant announcements. Victor wants to step down as pack elder. He's recommending we assume full leadership of the unified territories. Kira turned in his arms, studying the face that had become more precious to her with each passing year. Are we ready for that? Are we ever ready for any of this? Damon's smile held all the love and wonder of their first kiss in the ancient stone circle. But we've managed so far. Luna chose that moment to wake fully, her amber eyes, so like her mother's, fixing on her parents with the solemn intensity that seemed to run in alpha bloodlines. When she smiled, it was with the radiant confidence of a child born into a world where love had already conquered hate. She's going to be extraordinary, Kira murmured. They both are. The first generation to grow up in a world where Blackthorne and Silvermoon children play together, learn together, dream together. Damon's voice carried the weight of prophecy. They'll see possibilities we can't even imagine. From somewhere in the pack lands, a familiar howl rose into the morning air. Not the territorial challenge of the old days, but the joyful announcement that another mated pair had chosen to join their community. It was answered by dozens of voices, creating a harmony that spoke of unity, acceptance, and hope. Do you remember what you said the night before our wedding? Kira asked. About changing the world. That the real work was just beginning. Damon's eyes held the same fierce determination that had carried them through trials, betrayals, and impossible choices. Looks like we were right. Good thing we like a challenge. As they stood together at the window, their children safe in their arms and their people thriving in the valley below, Kira felt the mate bond that connected her to Damon pulse with something deeper than love, with the absolute certainty that they had found their purpose in each other and in the world they were building together. The forbidden love that had once seemed impossible had become the foundation for a new age. And this was only the beginning. Somewhere in the distance, the sound of construction echoed through the mountains. New homes being built, new lives being shaped, new dreams taking root in soil that had once been watered with the blood of ancient enemies. The revolution continued, carried forward by love letters written in laughter and legacy, in the voices of children who would never know the hatred that had defined their ancestors. So, Damon said, pressing a kiss to Kira's temple as Luna dozed peacefully between them. Ready to change the world again? With you. Kira's smile held all the love that had started this impossible journey. Always. And in the garden below, young Marcus looked up at his parents' window and waved, his grin bright with the confidence of a child born into a world where anything was possible, especially love. The end.